Next, we're going to look at another important structure called loops. So let's just close up this document here, and we'll go back to our working files, and we'll open up the number 3 try loops document. I'll just drag it into the browser so we can see what it looks like to start with, and I'll also drag it into our TextEdit file so that we can start to edit it. Now, this one's pretty empty right now, so we're going to be building a JavaScript loop structure, and that's a structure that simply repeats code. But before we do, I want to take a little closer look at operators used inside the program. In our last section, we saw that there were some strange-looking comparison operators, like the equals sign. And you'll probably see other things in JavaScript that look equally strange. So I just wanted to go over a few of them so we could see how they worked and know what to expect when we open up and look at other JavaScripts. When we're talking about operators, we're talking about things like the plus sign, or the minus sign, or divide, and you already know what all those do. But we do have some other strange operators that perform special functions for us. And the reason that I'm going over them here is that you'll commonly find them in JavaScripts that you acquire from the web. So let's just set up a little sample and we can try some of these operators out. For starters, inside the script statement, I'm going to add just a variable a, and I'm going to set it equal to a value like 6. Next, let's use the document write statement to write out the value of the variable to the page. I'll add a little label to it. We'll say the variable a equals, give it a space and close the quotes, and then I'm going to use the plus sign to add our variable to the message. So we'll add a. Close the quotes and end the statement with a semicolon. And of course, if we run this right now, we'll see the variable a equals 6. So what I want to do is just use an operator to change the value of a. Here I'll write a equals, and what we'll set it to is the original value of a, which is 6, and then we'll just say plus 3. Now, of course, that's going to equal 9. Let's just save our changes. We'll go out and refresh our page, and we can see the variable a equals 9. So, of course, we understand basic operators. Well, the first special operator that I want to show you is a shortcut way to write this same statement that we've written right here. A equals a plus 3. We're going to take whatever a equaled before and just add 3 to it. And if you want to do that in JavaScript, you can do that in shorthand by writing a plus equals 3. Now, there's no space between the plus and the equals sign, and this should perform exactly the same function. So I'm going to save my changes. We'll go back and refresh the page, and as you can see, the variable a still equals 9. Now, if you understand what plus equals does, you should also understand what minus equals does. This is going to take the original value of a and subtract 3 from it. Let's save our changes, and if we go back out to our page and refresh, we can see that now the variable a is equal to 3, which is correct, 6 minus 3. Now, there's one more of these special operators that I want to show you because we're going to need it in our loop structure. So let's go back over to our document and try it out. Now, this time, instead of using the minus equals or plus equals operators, I'm simply going to replace the end of that statement with plus plus, and I'll add a semicolon so that the statement is ended correctly. Now, the plus plus statement is interesting because it also adds to the a variable's original value. But what it does is it just increments it by 1. So let's save our changes and we'll see how that works. I'll go back out to our document and refresh. And now you can see the variable a is equal to 7, which of course is 6 plus 1. In the same way that minus equals work the same as plus equals, we can also do a decrement operation or subtract 1 from a by using the minus minus operator. And let's save our changes and we'll just see how that one works. Now when I refresh the page, you can see the variable a equals 5, which is 6 minus 1. Well, now we're ready to start looking at our loop structure. So let me go back to our document, and we don't really need this script here, so I'm going to remove that, and we'll try out a typical looping structure within JavaScript. The most common way this is formed is with what's called a for loop, and that's because we're going to use the for keyword. So I'll start out my document by writing for, and then I'm going to have some parentheses. I'll go ahead and close those parentheses. And following that, we're going to have a set of braces. Now you can see this structure is used for a lot of different things in JavaScript. So far, we've used it for our if statements, and it almost looks like a function statement. So by now, it should start to look a little familiar to you. With the for loop, we're going to use the braces this time to contain JavaScript statements which will repeat, and the parentheses will be used to describe a condition that will tell us how many times we'll repeat the code. Now let's put in a typical for loop. First of all, for the conditions, I'm going to want to count up to a certain number. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, we're going to tell it how high we want it to count, and we're also going to tell the program what we want to count by. So let's try that out. First of all, I need to describe a variable that I'm going to use to count. So why don't I use the word count? What I'm doing here is setting this variable up as its starting position. So I'm going to start it counting at 0 by setting count equal to 0. Now we'll use a semicolon here inside the statements because we've got 3 parts to this statement that we want to separate. So I'll type semicolon, and the next thing we want to do is describe how high we want to count. I'll set ours so that as long as count is less than 10, we'll continue repeating the loop. Now we need another semicolon, and the last part of our description tells the program what we want to count by. 1s, 2s, 5s, etc. In this case, I'd like to count by 1s, so the way we write that is we set up our variable, count, and normally people will use the increment operator in order to adjust the count by 1s. So I'll just type plus plus. Now, just like the if structure, we can put whatever we want inside the braces. So what I'd like to do is just write out the variable count for each loop that it's doing. I'll use the document write statement for that. I'll add a little label with some text. I'll write the current count is, give it a little space, close off my quotes, and then we'll just add on our count variable. Remember, it's going to start at 0 and then count it by 1s until it's not less than 10. Now, since I'm expecting our document write statement to execute a few times in a row, I'm going to add one more thing onto our document write before I finish out. I'm going to add a plus, and then I'm going to put in here a BR tag so we get a line break. I've put that in quotes because it's going to be part of the text that we enter, not a variable. And now I can close off the parentheses for my function and end it with a semicolon. Then we just save our changes and we're ready to try it out. Let's go back to our document here and I'll refresh the page. And you can see we got a whole bunch of statements in here. We only wrote one document write statement, and yet we see 10 executions of it. And we can easily see the count variable starting at 1 and each time 1 being added to it. The last one on the list is 9, which is less than 10, and you can see that if we added one more to it, it would be equal to 10, which wouldn't be less than 10, so our loop stops. Now, this is typically how a programmer can repeat code over and over again any number of times they need to inside of a JavaScript application.